All right, everyone. Once again, this is Lee Anderson with the AFL-CIO. I want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon for today's 1U digital training. Today, the topic is going to be on digital strategy. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into exactly what the heck that all means, and furthermore, how you all can use that as you go forward to advance your campaign work. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn this over to our trainer for the day, Rachel LaBruyere, who is the Deputy Director here at the AFL-CIO's Digital Strategies Department. One last thing I want to add before I actually do turn it over to Rachel. I want to ask that you all hold your questions until the end of this presentation, at which point we'll go through question and answers. And to answer the questions, you're simply going to press the number 1 button on your keypad, or I should say to ask questions rather, and then I will call on you from there. So with that all being said, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And Rachel, take it away.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Like Lee said, my name is Rachel LaBruyere, and this is Strategy for Digital Campaigns training. On your screen, you should see my lovely, lovely headshot. It's a selfie. I need professional headshots at some point in my life. But also my email address. I can put this screen back up at the end, but I want to make sure that everybody on the call right now has my email address in case you want to follow up with a question after the training, in case we don't have enough time to fully answer your questions at the end. I will say that I might be a little slow getting back to you, but I promise to return your email as soon as I possibly can so we can connect later. So one of the things I want to make sure you guys know before I dive right into the objectives for this training, this is a brand new training for us, so any and all feedback, if you want to email me with feedback, if you want to email Lee with feedback and tell Lee not to tell me what your name is so you can do it anonymously, please do. This is a brand new training, so we're trying really hard to think of new trainings that we think people have an appetite for, that there's a need for, and this is one of them. So a couple of things that I'm hoping to do in this hour with you all today. Number 1 is define strategy. What is it that we're talking about when we talk about strategy? The second thing is tease apart strategy from goals and tactics. Oftentimes those 3 things are used totally interchangeably in our work. And I actually think that it makes our work weaker when those 3 things are conflated. So let's tease those apart today. Number 3 is learn ways to craft an effective strategy. So a couple of tools and ideas to spark ways to build an effective strategy for the campaigns that you're running. And then number 4, which is slightly similar but different, is learn what you need to know to be strategic. What are the questions you need to ask? What are the questions you need to answer? What's the research you need to do to run a strategic online campaign? So our agenda, I'm going to walk through a definition of strategy. That might sound silly, but we're going to start with the basics today. We're going to talk a little bit about what strategy isn't, and then we're going to talk about tips and tools for crafting an online strategy. I'm going to give you a real-life campaign example of a new campaign that was just launched, and we're going to walk you through how they came up with their current online strategy, and then we're going to have some time for Q&A. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Strategy, you see the lovely pronunciation, the phonetics pronunciation up there. A careful plan or method for achieving a particular goal, usually over a long period of time, or the skill of making or carrying out plans to achieve a goal. It might sound a little basic that I put this slide up here to start, but I want to make sure that we're reminding ourselves that strategy is not the end-all be-all here. In fact, the end-all be-all of a campaign is achieving that campaign goal. And oftentimes, I find that we revert back to the goal is just to run a campaign. The goal is not to run a campaign. The goal is to win. So I want to make sure that we're remembering that a strategy is a way to get to that goal and accomplish that goal. A strategy is also not a tactic. It's not use Facebook, and a strategy is not run a campaign. So just want to make sure that we're defining strategy first and foremost up front here. I want to talk a little bit, and I just mentioned this briefly, I want to talk a little bit about what strategy isn't for just a moment, because like I said, I really want to tease apart the idea of a goal, a strategy, and then tactics. really, I put together this slide because I feel like everybody is either taking vacation or in desperate need of a vacation right now. We're all about to enter into, the death grip of the election cycle. So I was like, what's a good goal that we can think about a strategy for? So the goal I came up with is relax and fend off burnout before the election season. This might be a little bit too real for some of y'all on the phone. It's a little too real for me right now. I'm not taking a vacation until post-election. But this is the goal that I set out with this lovely backdrop. So the goal is to relax and fend off burnout. Now, there's so many different strategies that we could think of to relax and fend off burnout. We could say, so many different things to get there, but the strategy that I chose is to take a vacation. So I'm thinking that if I take a vacation, that is the best strategy for me to relax and fend off burnout before the election season. The tactics to take a vacation would be buy an airplane ticket, request time off, drop the kids off at grandma's, pack a suitcase that doesn't include anything business casual. I want to be really clear that in this instance, I could have said my strategy is radical self-care, and taking a vacation could have been a tactic to serve that strategy. But in this instance, taking a vacation was what I decided my strategy was. So all of these things under here, these tactics, are the specific points that I'm going to leverage to get me to that goal. So I just wanted this slide to reiterate for you guys that a goal is, what do you want to accomplish? What do we want to achieve? A strategy is the overall method for getting there, and then the tactics are the specific point of leverage or usage of tools. In our case, oftentimes that's the specific points of leverage online with online tools to get us to our goal. I want to give a quick campaign example to sort of further reiterate these points. Respect the Bump, which is an amazing campaign that's affiliated with our Walmart, is this lovely woman in the picture is Tiffany Baroyd. She worked at a Walmart in Laurel, Maryland, and when she was 7 months pregnant, her doctors told her that she really needed to be doing lighter work because there were complications in her pregnancy. Instead of giving her lighter work, Walmart made her take a leave of absence. She was scrambling to pay her bills, which, medical bills when you're delivering a child are pretty hefty. And so she and other Walmart associates, mostly women, banded together and formed Respect the Bump. Their goal was policy changes at Walmart around pregnancy for employees. The strategy that they decided to use was to publicly tell women's stories, like Tiffany's story, while internally pressuring Walmart. The tactics they used were a public letter to Walmart shareholders, worker events. They used social media to do the storytelling about workers like Tiffany, who are really suffering at the hands of the current Walmart policy. And then they even had shareholders get a shareholder resolution on the ballot at a Walmart shareholder meeting. All of this is, again, to reiterate, there's your goal, there's the strategy, and then there are the tactics that serve the strategy. And I think that we are all at risk of sometimes conflating these three, but getting really, really clear on the difference between these three can help us run better online campaigns. But I want to be really clear that it's not just online or offline. In this last slide, you'll notice that some of these tactics weren't digital tactics. A public letter was not necessarily a digital tactic, but it was something that could be amplified online and posted online and circulated online. Worker events were actually a fully traditional offline tactic, but many of those workers were connecting on Facebook and spreading the word about the events online in order to go offline with that tactic. Social media storytelling was definitely an online tactic, but then the shareholder resolution was a much more traditional tactic. So one of the things I want to make sure that we think about when we're thinking about digital strategy is it's not just digital strategy, it's not just online or offline, it's strategy. Anytime that you're thinking through the strategy on a campaign, you're designing out the tactics, you're writing a campaign plan, what you're doing online needs to be fully integrated with the rest of the campaign, whether or not that's your communication strategy, your field strategy. In this case, it was actually a shareholder strategy. Sometimes there's a legal strategy to a campaign, but that digital component should not be created totally separately from the rest of those components. And I know that we've said this many a time on these trainings, but I cannot stress this point enough. And I think that Respect the Bump example is a really, really good example of strategy isn't just online or offline, it's both. It really needs to be fully integrated if you're going to be as effective as you possibly can. So, again, getting back to basics, and if this feels really basic for you, that's actually great. You are exactly where you need to be, but we want to ask some simple questions before we can even begin thinking about what is our digital strategy in this campaign. So the first and foremost question is, what is your goal? And as a side note, I want y'all to know, within the AFL-CIO headquarters building, our team has a reputation. And that reputation is when people come to us and request things, we often respond with, what's your goal here? People don't really like that very much, but we wear that like a badge of honor because before we can really begin to think about what is a digital strategy component to what's being asked of us, we want to figure out what's the overall goal here. So feels really basic, but sometimes it's the thing that people overlook the most when they're thinking about strategy, and specifically when they're thinking about online work. So number one, what's your goal? The second thing is, who is your target? Who is the person that can make the decision to help you accomplish your goal? Maybe that person is the CEO of Walmart. Maybe that person is somebody on down the totem pole at an organization or a corporation. If you're in an election, your target is perhaps swing voters, or maybe it's women voters, maybe it's young voters. But who is your target? Who are the people that you need to convince to be on your side in order to accomplish that goal? After those two questions have been answered, that's when you start designing your strategy. You can't start designing your strategy until you answer at least these two questions. The other things that need to be a part of the mix are research on your target. What moves them? What influences them? Who are people they listen to? What are messages? What are the messages that move them? Really figuring out how you can get to that target. Find your allies. Who are the people that can help you deliver those messages? Who are the people who are already with you who could help you amplify, the social media storytelling about Walmart workers that you need in order to execute your strategy well? Draw your power map. We're going to get into this a little bit later. But I'm assuming that most of you on the phone have done a power map before. Maybe some of you haven't. But one of the things that I think people often get confused about when we talk about digital strategy is they want to treat it like it's something totally different than any other type of strategy. It's the same. You can draw a power map as effectively online with your online targets and your online strategy as you can with an offline or a traditional field strategy. So draw your power map. Think about who your influencers are that can help you get to your target. Who has the power? Who has the sway? Where are they at? Are they with you? Are they not? How can you get them to get with you so that they can help you influence your target? And we'll get into this a little bit more depth later. And then determine your tactics. I want to be really clear that tactics came at the end of this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. But when I say tactic, things online like create a Facebook graphic to tell the story of Tiffany as a pregnant Walmart worker, that's a specific tactic, and that's great. But oftentimes we're like, all right, we have a campaign where we want Walmart to change their policy. Let's create a Facebook graphic. That's not a strategy, that's a tactic. So make sure that that's coming at the very end. You shouldn't start choosing those tactics until you've actually done all of this research and answered all of these questions. So, and I know I'm beating a dead horse right now, but I want to make sure that we're really walking through this in the beginning. So one more, and this is a fake campaign example of goals, tactics, and tools, and all of the things I just talked about combined. So say our goal is ending wage theft at Evil Corporation Incorporated. You like my company name? Evil Corporation Incorporated. The target, who has the power to do that? Who is it that has the power to end wage theft there? We decide it's Greedy CEO. Greedy CEO becomes our target. We do our power map, who can influence our target. We really think hard about who secondary targets are, who are other people who are already with us, who do we need to get with us in order to influence that target. Then we think through our strategy, which we decide is we know that Evil Corp is really susceptible to bad press. They hate bad press. We know the Greedy CEO loves to be the good guy. He really hates to be villainized. So we want to publicly shame Evil Corp and make Greedy CEO the face of that public shame, while privately educating board members to pressure him also. So there's a couple of different things that are under the umbrella of our strategy. Many of those, and most specifically the public shaming, is ripe for digital tools and tactics. So some of the digital tactics we might use are social media pressure and targeted advertising to customers using these tools. Facebook, we want to run Facebook ads that brand jam Evil Corporation Incorporated to really turn the tables on them and make sure that folks know that they're evil and they're robbing people of wages. We're going to take it to Twitter, and we're going to target the CEO because we know he's really active on Twitter. So every single thing we tweet, we ask people to retweet any thunderclap we use, and those are all different tactics we could use on Twitter. We're going to make sure that that CEO's handle is included in all of those. Maybe we launch a petition targeting the CEO, and email becomes another tactic for us there to push that petition, and we run Google and Facebook ads targeting customers. So I want to walk you guys through how we get from the goal through to the target, the power map, the strategy, and then eventually to the tactics. And I know that we're guilty of it here at the AFL-CIO too. Oftentimes we actually start with the tactics and then we try to reverse engineer from there. That does not a good strategy make. It does not a solid strategy make. And if we're just doing one or two of these tactics without a clear understanding of what our overall strategy or goal is, that's also not a campaign. That's a couple of tactics. Those are one-off tactics. So again, tactics come after. So when you're thinking about launching a campaign, or maybe there's a campaign that you guys have been running for a while and you're really thinking about how digital can help amplify that campaign, think about what are the tools at your disposal and which are the best to execute the strategy that you just laid out. It's actually really, really hard to choose which digital tools that you're going to use in a campaign if you don't understand very clearly what the strategy is. Oftentimes we're like, well, because we always do this, we're going to create a Facebook graphic, we're going to tweet some stuff, and we're going to send an email, done. That's actually not strategic. And maybe it is strategic. Maybe using Facebook, Twitter, and email is really strategic in this instance, but really you need clarity on what that strategy is. Who are you targeting? What are you asking them to do? What are the different, who are the different allies and groups that you've laid out that you need to help move that message? Those are really the things you need to be thinking about when you're choosing your tools and your tactics, specifically online. I think that because digital tools are relatively new, and oftentimes people think that they're totally separate from the field or from traditional communications, we tend to just say, we're going to use all of them. We're going to use everything. We're going to send an email. We're going to send a tweet. We're going to post on Facebook. We have a Pinterest page, so we're going to pin some stuff. And maybe we'll, post a link on Reddit. That all sounds great, and frankly, it's probably going to sound great to your leadership who doesn't fully understand what you do and doesn't fully understand digital. Your job as a digital practitioner is to say, no, we're not going to do all that stuff. We're going to do the things that we think are going to be the most effective tactics to serve that overall strategy. So, you don't need to throw everything in the kitchen sink at a campaign. You need to think through what are the tactics and the tools that are going to be the best use of your time to really leverage those specific points and tactics towards that overall strategy. So a couple of tools that we wanted to make sure you guys had in your toolbox as you're thinking through strategy, specifically digital strategy, even though this clearly applies across the board. The first tool is the power map. I love that our president knows how to draw a power map. Look how much younger he looks, back before life was crazy stressful. A power map is pretty basic. It's getting clear about who has the power to move the target, and maybe it's sometimes your overall target. Maybe sometimes you have a secondary target that can also be moved because that secondary target can get to your main target. But it's a pretty in-depth way to figure out who has the power, who's with you, who's not with you yet, who's never going to be with you, but where are the different places that you can push and the different levers that you can pull to get you to that overall goal and really execute that strategy excellently. I'm not going to walk through a power map training here. I don't think that would be a great use of your time. But if you know how to do a power map, fantastic. If you haven't done one in a long time, or if this is the first time you've ever even heard those two words in the same sentence, if you go to bit.ly/power_map, that's actually going to take you to a really, really wonderful online resource from moveon.org that will walk you through doing your power map. There's a super in-depth, but I think it's a really good place to start when you're thinking about, hey, we're going to launch this new campaign, and rather than just saying we're going to run directly at the target because it's what we always do, it's going to help you think a little bit more strategically about how can you get to that target to get them to do what you want them to do. And MoveOn is coming at it specifically from an online viewpoint, so I think it's going to be even more helpful for you. Again, not going to go into crazy depth here, but if you want to visit that page now, bookmark it. I think it's a really, really wonderful resource, and we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. MoveOn had this page available, so I wanted to send you there. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is something called critical pathways. Now, bear with me, because the first time I heard it, it got a little confusing. But this is a tool that Greenpeace, we actually first heard it from Greenpeace. I think there are multiple other people who use it, but we specifically heard it through from Greenpeace, who runs really effective and strategic campaigns. And it's one of the main tools that they think through, or that they use when they're thinking through their strategy and then thinking through the specific tactics that they're going to use to execute that strategy in service of an overall campaign goal. So you'll see here, and what we like to do is actually we use Post-its. So each of these little blue squares will be a Post-it that you can rearrange, put on your wall for a visual, and really sort of do some brainstorming and some jamming with your team on to figure this out. So walking you through this first square on the right that says start. This is your start point. So you don't have a campaign yet. You're just launching. You've thought about your strategy. You've thought about the different things that you're hoping to accomplish. This is your starting point. The next point is this moment. So each of these moments, each of these 3 moments, and there can be an unlimited number of moments in a campaign. I want to be clear about this. But each of these moments is following along your campaign arc. So you can see that nice big arc that I so artfully drew on this PowerPoint slide. Each of these moments should be hitting a moment in that campaign arc. But each of these represent public moments. So in the Respect the Bump campaign, for example, one public moment was when they published the public letter to Walmart shareholders asking them to change their policy for pregnant employees. That was a public moment in that campaign. Now, what you need to think about in these bottom squares, both the start and these squares that say staff, are what are the things that you need to do in order to make that moment a reality? And oftentimes those are when you're really, really drilling down into those tactics. I want to be clear that moment is a tactic too, but you're really drilling down into like the granular tactics of, all right, in order to make that public letter to Walmart shareholders a public moment, we need placement. We need to place that in an op-ed column in a major national newspaper. We need a clear place when people land on our website that people can read the public letter. We need to make sure that we're getting all of the people that we know that blog or write about Walmart to publish that letter so that when that moment happens, it's all over the place. Maybe you want to run Facebook ads that when people click through, they actually land on the page where you published the Walmart letter so that they know that it's there. But those in-between moments are what staff time and what resources do you need in order to make that moment a reality? It's just once you start, and I know this sounds a little bit like you're like, what the hell are you talking about, Rachel? I see a bunch of squares up there. It doesn't really make any sense to me. I would challenge you to take a stack of Post-its, a couple of your coworkers, and think through one of the campaigns that you are either trying to, you're about to launch or you're even running right now, and think through what are these individual moments, put them up on the wall, put them in order of like, this is what our campaign plan looks like, and then use those other Post-its underneath to say, here's what we need to make sure that we do in order to get these done. And it's really going to be helpful both for you to visualize the overall campaign arc of what you have going on, but also all the work that's necessary in between those moments. Specifically for digital campaigners, people think what we do is magic. They think you can just press that, unicorn online campaign button and out pops this big, beautiful online campaign ready-made for you. That is not true. It takes so much work to get to these public moments. Even if the public moment is launching a petition online through your email list, you really need lots and lots of work to get there. So another tool that we'd like to offer you guys is Critical Pathways. Again, this came from Greenpeace. If you're confused, if you want more information on it, feel free to contact me. We can walk you through it and how we've used it in some of our own campaign and strategic plannings. But the basic idea is that, this follows your entire campaign arc and it gets you to that big, beautiful green win there at the end. Let's get real. Sometimes coordinating with other members of our own organizations, our own unions, is about as hard as it is for this cat to walk in shoes, which I really love this GIF. I hope you can all see it. This cat is struggling. Oftentimes, digital is the left foot, communication's the right foot, the field is the back left foot, and maybe leadership is like the back right foot, and none of you are staying coordinated. Everybody's going after a different strategy in this campaign. Since everybody has a different strategy, everybody's also using totally drastically different tactics, and your campaign is just not as strong as it could be. I'm saying this because we've experienced this firsthand at the AFL-CIO. So we're going to talk a little bit about things that we've been doing to make coordination on strategy and campaigning a little bit easier and a little bit more coordinated, so maybe this cat isn't walking like a crazy. I'm still on this slide because I love watching this GIF, guys. Sorry. But let's get real. How do we stay coordinated? If you take nothing else away from this training, get in there early. We, as the AFL-CIO digital strategies team, were so used to people handing us a fully written campaign plan where there was one line buried on the 5th page that says, we're going to use the internet. And that was their digital portion of their plan. So they'd hand us a fully written campaign plan, and we'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. We're just supposed to throw digital on top of this, smack it on top, and, be expected to run really strategic online digital campaigns. It's not the way it works. So we've worked hard to get in there early. When we're starting to think about the campaign, when we're starting to decide targets, when we're starting to think about strategy, digital needs to be a part of those conversations too. I'm not saying that that's going to be fully possible for you, but reminding people that digital needs to be a part of that conversation, reminding them as often as you possibly can, especially when they hand you a campaign plan and say, all right, now do some online stuff with it, saying, it would be a lot more strategic if we could get in there early with you, so we're actually helping to set the strategy, because it turns out digital practitioners know a thing or two about strategy and how to move strategy online. The second thing is digital as program versus support. If you were all in a room with me, I would ask you to raise your hands if you've ever felt like your digital work gets treated as a total support program or a support department. And by that, I mean digital doesn't actually get to decide any of the strategy or any of the tactics. They just have to execute them. They just support all the other smart people that know what they're doing. Our department has worked very hard to remind people that we actually are a program department. We're not just a support department. That doesn't mean we can't provide support in campaigns that aren't our own or we aren't running. Absolutely we can. But when you're asking us to carry the entirety of the water of the digital portion of a campaign, we need to really be treated as a program department. So, again, that goes into the get in there early, but reminding people that digital should have a space at the table when we're talking about strategy, when we're talking about tactics, when we're really deciding what the shape of a campaign is going to look like. Don't expect perfection. Don't expect people, once you tell them, hey, I need to be let in early, they're not going to remember. And in fact, once they're even bought into the idea that you should be looped in early, they still may not remember because they're so used to just saying, oh, we'll give this to digital once we've decided it. Just try not to get frustrated. Try to remind them as firmly and politely as you can that you really need to be in there early, and all these things that you continue to remind them are important, but don't expect perfection. Also, make it an iterative process. And all I mean by that is when our team was really in the growing pains of this with a couple of the other major departments at the AFL-CIO, we would do a postmortem on a campaign. We'd debrief on it and say, all right, what went well and what didn't go well. We think about what were the pain points for us to really get the most effective digital version of this campaign running. Was it that we weren't fully coordinated with media outreach, or was it that we weren't clear what the field was doing because we didn't actually have somebody sitting on their calls every Monday? So make it an iterative process in that learn from those mistakes, learn from those pain points, and then the next time you run a campaign, try to preempt them. Say, you know what? Last time we really weren't coordinated with you guys. Would it be all right if somebody from our team sat in on X call to make sure we were getting all the information possible? Or can one of you, can somebody from your media outreach team come to our meeting to make sure that we know what the other person is doing? So again, this is a little bit of real talk because it's not always going to be perfect, and people aren't always going to say, you know what, we should probably make sure digital is involved in this conversation, but keep pushing. You're going to get there. It's going to keep getting better, baby steps. I promise we can do this. It's not going to be easy. One example of a campaign that I think has been very strategic, and they've even switched up their strategy a couple times, has been this Listen Up campaign with the American Federation of Musicians. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this campaign, the quick rundown of their goal, what they were trying to do was to get Lionsgate, which is a very, very well-known film production company. So to get Lionsgate and other production companies, they actually chose Lionsgate as the target because Lionsgate is, it prides itself on being an industry leader of supporting union work in almost all other aspects of its work except for its music. It outsources its music and offshores its music to companies that aren't union, frankly, and oftentimes aren't American. So it's offshoring musicians' jobs. The goal was to ask them to stop. The goal is that they would respect union contracts, hire union musicians, and really lead as an example. Now, again, you'll hear that when they decided that this was the target, they thought long and hard about who the target should be. There was serious research put into Lionsgate as the target, but this is the overall goal of the campaign: get Lionsgate and other production companies to stop offshoring musicians' jobs and uphold industry standards on pay and working conditions. Pretty big goal, but they were really clear on this is what success is going to look like on this campaign. Now, they decided their target within Lionsgate would be CEO John Feldheimer. He's a very public figure. He speaks in spaces. If you Google him, he has a really big online footprint. So they really felt like he was the best person to target publicly in this campaign, and he's clearly the person that can make this decision at the very top. Their strategy was to publicly brand Lionsgate and the CEO as offshores and shame them into doing the right thing. I want to be really clear, this wasn't always their strategy. Their strategy actually started out as much more like, we want to apply friendly pressure to Lionsgate to do the right thing. But as soon as they asked Lionsgate for that first meeting, they asked the CEO for a meeting, and they said no, and they actually totally ignored AFM. They were like, all right, our strategy is now around public shaming. And they got a lot more aggressive with it. So strategy can change, and your tactics should switch up to meet that. One of the things I want to make sure you guys know here is that Andy Richards from my team was involved at the very beginning with these conversations. So I think it's an incredibly good example of a campaign where digital got in there early, helped shape the campaign, helped shape the strategy, and was really at the table, with decision making. And therefore, that meant that once we got to the place, and I'm going to get to this next slide, once we got to the place where we were deciding what were the tactics that the best digital tactics to support this strategy, on the digital side, Andy was really clear on how we got to this target, this strategy, and these decisions, which meant that those tactics, those digital tactics, could be much more effective and strategic in really serving this overall vision for what the strategy should look like. So, some of the digital tactics that have been used so far, a Twitter storm at the Lionsgate handle. So Lionsgate actually is quite active on Twitter, and there was a Twitter storm to tweet at them asking them to do the right thing. There's been petitions targeting CEO Feldheimer. These are the digital tactics. In a second, I'm going to talk about the offline tactics they've supported. Facebook graphics calling out Lionsgate's offshoring to make sure that they're really doing that branding of them as the offshoring film production company. Targeted Facebook ads at fans of Lionsgate movies. So Lionsgate produces some of the most popular movies around right now. Hunger Games, Last Man Standing was one of their most recent films. So anybody who likes these movies on Facebook can be targeted with an ad reminding them that people who produce these movies are actually sending jobs overseas. It's an incredibly effective tactic. And then a thunderclap targeting the CEO specifically, since they really chose him as the center target of this campaign. Now, all of these tactics are actually being they're both supporting and amplifying offline tactics. So some of the offline tactics have been, we gathered petitions on an online petition using email, using social media. And once our goal was 10,000 signatures. Once we got to 10,000 signatures, there was actually an entire offline tactic of a very public petition delivery in front of Lionsgate's offices in New York City. So this is a really, really good example of, it wasn't just, we started an online petition, a bunch of people signed it, and that was it. It was fully integrated into the field plan of working up to that moment on that critical pathway, that public moment of a petition delivery in New York outside of Lionsgate's headquarters there. Or not their headquarters, their office. I believe their headquarters is in California, sorry. Other things that they've done, they've actually organized a couple of interesting direct actions, one of which was there's food trucks that line up outside of the Lionsgate production, like the production headquarters in Los Angeles, and they actually, using Facebook, recruited people to come out to the food trucks that day to make sure that they talk to Lionsgate employees about the fact that this was happening and say, hey, we've been asking your CEO for a meeting because we want you guys to offshoring jobs. We want to make sure you know this. Can you bring this back to your supervisor? Here's a one-pager. But the beautiful thing about this was, that's an offline tactic. That's a totally offline tactic, except for what we had done with Facebook targeting, or Facebook ad targeting could really make sure that we got the word out to people who were, liking those ads, who were clicking through on those ads, to make sure that the folks in that area were the people we were recruiting to go out there and actually talk to Lionsgate employees. So I just want to be clear that there is full integration here, where I actually think that digital tactics have been leading on this campaign, but there has been no shortage of offline tactics that it's been supporting and working in integration with. All right. The last thing I want to talk about, and I think I'm leaving plenty of time for questions, and I hope you guys have lots of them, is, and this slide is still titled Let's Get Real, because a little bit of real talk. Sometimes we have to run campaigns that we don't actually think are strategic. We don't think they have a solid strategy. And people might yell at me for this, but I'm going to give you an example of a real life campaign that we think falls into this category of a symbolic campaign. So everybody knows that there is a federal bill to raise the minimum wage that we really, really wish that the Senate would pass. Anytime that you talk to anybody that does government affairs or lobbying work for a living, they spend time on the Hill here in DC, they'll tell you the bill probably doesn't have a chance of passing, but we still ran a giant national campaign to try and to ask people to call their senator to tell them to pass this bill. That doesn't sound like a really sound strategy, right? Pressure senators to say yes on a bill that you actually know that they're not going to say yes on. However, you can run symbolic campaigns that maybe the overarching public strategy isn't all that strategic, but they can still be strategic for an internal strategy. And what I mean by that is things like minimum wage, where you actually know you're not going to win. So the public strategy of, pressuring members of Congress into doing the right thing, maybe not that strategic because everybody can kind of see through it. But internally, you know that you can use this strategically to, run some tests on your email list about which sort of minimum wage messages people respond to the most. So, your tactics could be those different email messages with the strategy of we want to utilize this moment to learn more about our email lists, and your goal is figure out what is the most effective minimum wage messaging that we can use in our campaigning. Or maybe your goal is we want to grow our list by 10,000 people, while we run this campaign. And you can think through, what's your strategy there? We're going to use a combination of Facebook ads and, share asks to make sure that we're getting both organic and paid growth on our list. And the different tactics would be the ads and the emails themselves. That's getting a little bit, into the weeds, but one thing we want to be clear about is that we all end up having to run those campaigns that we just don't feel like they're the most strategic use of our time. We can flip the script there and make sure that they're being used strategically for internal goals, internal organizing, things that your team wants to accomplish that maybe aren't things like passing legislation. So even if a campaign is weak on public strategy, it can be strong on an internal strategy. Keep calm and be strategic. Don't yell at people and say, I can't believe you're going to make me run this campaign, even though we're not going to win it. Think about, all right, how can I use this moment to really be strategic and effective for the goals that we've set for ourselves as a team or as an organization? I'm going to go ahead and take questions. That was a lot, and I actually got through it a little bit quicker than I thought I would, but I've left a full 20 minutes for questions. And one thing I want to be, before we ask you guys to start raising your hands, one thing I do want to say is, we didn't really drill down into specific tools, which tools are best used for which tactics and things like that. I feel like we've done a lot of that in some of our other trainings about when to use Facebook, when to use Twitter, and when to use email. So this was a much bigger sort of 10,000 foot view on strategy and digital. But I think we could just open it up for questions.
Yeah, totally. So, Rachel, thank you so much for that. That was really informative and very well put together. Folks, as she mentioned, it's question and answer time. So, if you have a question that you would like to ask Rachel, press the number 1 on your keypad, and I will call your name and let you ask your question. All right, it looks like we've got a question here from Matt. Matt, please go ahead.
Yes, what is the term brand jam refer to? But
Great question. I really should have clarified and defined that for you guys. So brand jamming is like the least favorite thing that our legal team knows about that we try to do with our digital work. And by that I mean it's actually using a company, a corporation, whoever it is, whoever your target is, it's using their own brand against them. So with Google, their motto is actually "Don't be evil." And we were running a campaign asking Google to basically like denounce they had been they're part of the ALEC network. They actually give funds to ALEC. So we were running a campaign asking Google to stop funding ALEC, and we actually used their own, their color scheme, those like big rainbow, round, shiny letters, and their motto of "Don't be evil." We actually turned that around on them. So we didn't use their exact logo because, there's legal issues here, but we used some of that same branding to actually turn it around and say, Google's being evil, and it works when it's a recognizable brand, when it's, a brand like Google, when it's a brand that people know the motto of, people know sort of the taglines and their own advertising, and really using that advertising to sort of in like a kung fu way divert that energy back at that brand. Does that make sense?
Sorry about that, Matt. You may have been on mute. Did that make sense to you, buddy?
yes, it did. Thanks.
Cool. And I can send around a couple examples of really effective brand jamming. I love it as a tactic. One thing I will say is my lawyers don't love it as a tactic. So if it's something you're interested in doing, you should definitely let us know, because it's a struggle on the legal side. We're still pushing the envelope though.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question, Matt. We also have a question here from Zeta. Zeta, please go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. It's really great. The first question, and then I have another, is simply, are you going to be sending out copies of the slide presentation after this?
So we don't generally send them around, but what I can make sure that I do is send the link to all of the participants who are on the call, where we house all of the 1U digital trainings. So I'll make sure that goes out to all of you and that you have that.
And on that page, it's both, we'll have a video recording of this training and the PowerPoint slides. So you'll get both of them.
Great. So the actual question is, when you do a symbolic campaign, and you know it's a symbolic campaign, how do you decide how to allocate your various resources?
That is a great question. And that's something that I think it's got to be on a case-by-case basis. For us, one of the things that we look at is, if it is truly a symbolic campaign, how big of a priority is it for an affiliate, for our leadership? If it's a big priority for somebody that we know politically is important, then we're probably gonna allocate a little bit more time than we would if it were less of a priority. Additionally, if there are real things that we can get out of it, like I laid out, like maybe it's going to be symbolic, but maybe you can get some list growth, maybe you can do some testing, maybe there's a brand new tool that you were hoping to try out, you want to get some proof of concept on it. If we can figure out what those things are and how high they are internally to our own team on our own priority list, like list building is a huge priority for us this year. So if we think there's a list building possibility, we probably allocate a little bit more staff time and resources to it than we would if there weren't that opportunity. But it's really got to be a case-by-case basis. And one thing I will say is that it's something that you should actively advocate to be the arbiter of for your team. I think with digital, oftentimes people say, nope, we want this, this, and this, and you've got to do all the work on it, and we don't care that you don't think it's strategic. But being able to say, listen, I want to protect my team's time, so here, you asked for these 5 things. We think we think 2 of these things are strategic, and we're definitely going to give you those, but these other 3, we really don't feel like the return on investment of our staff time is going to be worth these. So always advocating for that if at all possible, because I think oftentimes with digital, people don't actually allow us to make those decisions for ourselves. But just to recap, I think both like politically, how much of a priority is it for you, and then internally, what are the things that you can get out of it to make it a more strategic internal campaign, and if those things are important to you, then allocating a bit more time for them.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from folks? While we've got Rachel here in captive.
Was I just so clear that nobody has any questions? I feel like there was a lot that I threw out there that people probably want to dig into. No more questions. We've got 12 more minutes, and I flew through that thinking we'd need so much time for questions.
All right, we've got another one from Zeta. Zeta, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, since you have 12 more minutes, maybe you can drill down a little bit more into the use of the various digital tactics that you threw out: Facebook, Twitter, petitions, email. When, how, and how to bounce them off of one another.
Oh man, one thing I do want to say is there's a specific training I'm thinking about that we do where we actually talk about like what are the best uses of each of the tools. But really briefly, I think that it depends on a lot of things. It depends on your list. How big is your email list? Where is your email list concentrated? If you're running a campaign where you've decided that the strategy that you're going to pursue is really talking to people who are like specifically customers of that corporation or that store or that brand, and you know that you don't really have that many of those customers on your list, your email list probably isn't the best place to get to people who are going to take the correct action. Maybe the best place to get to people is through Facebook ads of people that have liked them on Facebook, or maybe that's running Google ads on people that search for key terms that are associated with that company or that corporation. I think that oftentimes one of the biggest misconceptions is, hey, this is an important campaign, so we should send a full list email on it. That's not always the case. Sometimes maybe your campaign, maybe you're a national union and you run national campaigns, but maybe this campaign is, specific to a particular state. Let's take Missouri for an example. This is because Lee and I worked together on a Missouri campaign where our list in Missouri wasn't that huge. So actually, we needed to invest way more time into list building actively with the field in Missouri than we did to just emailing our list and asking them to take action and, call the state house. Again, that's the same goes for Facebook. If your Facebook page is large and it's really active, then maybe, and part of your campaign strategy is, like with Respect the Bump, this like public narrative storytelling about the company and about the people affected, then maybe Facebook is a great tactic for you to utilize, because you can create a great share graphic that has that person's face on it and a quick quote from them that, points back to a blog post. And you can ask all of your Facebook fans to share it. You could even ask, people that on listservs who are on Facebook to share it. You could even ask people on your email list who are on Facebook to share it. But Facebook is a really great example of what would be an effective tactic there. But, and all that is to say that you don't have to use all the tools all the time. But I think that the top three I would say would be email, Facebook, Twitter. Twitter, I think, is a great tool for spreading the word. I don't think it's as much of a campaign tool unless your target is on Twitter. If your target is not on Twitter, then yelling at them on Twitter is not the way to go. It's not an effective tactic. It's not something you should sink a lot of time into. But if, for example, I know that T-Mobile is a campaign that CWA is running that we're helping on. John Leisure, however you say his last name, is really active on Twitter. So actually trying to focus time and resources into leveraging Twitter as a tool where you're really publicly pressuring him and those mentions are showing up, on his account, that would be a tactic that would be appropriate for that campaign. If it's a company where the CEO is old and he's stodgy and he's not on Twitter, their leadership doesn't care about social media, perhaps that's not an effective use of your time. You should really be thinking a little bit more strategically about how to get to those folks. And maybe that's not even online, right? Maybe the digital portion of that strategy isn't about running directly at the target, but maybe the digital portion of that strategy is about gathering allies who can help you spread the word. I'm not sure that really effectively answered your question, Zeta, but what I can make sure to do, and I apologize because the title of the specific training I'm thinking about is escaping me right now, but I have given it before, where we actually have slides that walk through, this is what Facebook is good for, this is what Twitter is good for, this is what email is good for, here's what video is good for, that gives you a much clearer sort of breakout of when you're trying to accomplish this tool is a good use of your time. And I can make sure that when we send out the link to this training, I can see if we can also include the name of that training, because if you go back to where all of our One U Digital Strategy trainings are housed, it's in there, and so is its PowerPoint and its video.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Zeta. We also have another question now from Kevin. Kevin.
Hey, Rachel. So the question I have is, how often would you recommend reviewing or looking at your strategy as you're going through a campaign? I ask because I've had instances where you write up multiple steps and you plan out each step and you're doing the work, and then after step one, say you realize that maybe a group who needed to take portion of it in the field drop the ball, or that your messaging is just completely not working. And it feels like if you keep following through, at what point you keep following through and you're not really being effective, but you're following through on your original strategy plan. Is there a point that you recommend, or how you start reviewing what's going on? And then also, when your strategy relies on outside components like field or affiliate or other programs, and that's not happening, what do you recommend, and what do you kind of do for a digital strategy on that?
Those are both awesome questions, and I would like to include answers to them in the next version of this training. So how often do you review? I don't think this is going to be a satisfactory answer, but in my mind, as often as you need to. I do think that there can be times where, especially within the labor movement, there's so many politics to take into account that sometimes strategies, I feel like, can be and campaign plans can be blown up and rewritten 15 times in a week, and that's overkill. But I think as soon as you're clear that hey, this messaging is not working in the way we thought it was going to, and maybe that means that this messaging isn't working for our specific list in the way we thought it would. Maybe that messaging is going to work with a third, another audience that's outside of the typical people you're talking to. Maybe that's the right audience for you, and maybe you need to switch up your messaging for your own list. But I really think as often, anytime that you are clear that what you are doing, even though you've got this big, beautiful plan that you've written out, if it's not being effective and the numbers back that up, the metrics back that up, I think you kind of have to reevaluate. Now, I think that gets really tricky when it's leading into your next question, when it's other departments that are saying, we've got to reevaluate because X person is upset, or we've got to reevaluate because, field's not going to be able to do this. That to me is trickier territory. I think sometimes you move forward as far as you can until your own numbers are reflecting that you're not being effective. But I hate this answer, but I think as often as you have to, with the caveat that I think that people can go a little overboard with it, because if you write and blow up a campaign plan 5 times in a week, odds are good you have barely gotten started executing on that campaign plan. So there's got to be a balance. I'm really glad, Kevin, that you asked the question about the outside components. One of the things that our team tries to do, we're not always perfect at it, but we try to do is when we're writing the plan, when we're thinking about the different tactics and the moments and the timeline and the calendar, we actually think through what are the things that we can do no matter what, because we're only relying on us, and what are the things that we're relying on other people for. And we don't just say in the plan, it's not just hey, in order to do X thing, we need X department. It's we need this person, and this person in order to be able to move forward. And frankly, we'll hound people. If we know that something can't move forward without, 3 different people having input, or we need an answer from them, or we need confirmation on that field plan, we let them know early and often that we're counting on them for X part of our plan, and we will hound them for that information. You can't control those folks. And if there is one person or, team or one region that is always not, they're always falling down on that, they're not getting you that information that you need, when you write your next plan and you're clear that, hey, there's this thing that we've run into like 14 times, we're going to be relying on this specific set of people in order to execute this thing, make sure that your campaign is not hinging on that one thing, right? Make sure that you're really preempting that by saying, like, this is not a 1,000% necessary thing for this campaign to move forward. It would be nice if this happened. It would be added value if this happened, but this isn't like the central tactic that we're going to be utilizing. And that is an unfortunate reality. One of our mottos on our team is like, we can't fix other people. But getting really clear up front on what are the things that you can move forward on no matter what, and what are the things that you rely on other people for, and making sure that there's a good balance so that if you're stalled out on one of those things you rely on other people for, you can still move forward with some of the things that you had planned that you don't need other folks for, so that the campaign doesn't come to a screeching halt when somebody's not getting you something.
Thank you.
Great question. We have 2 minutes. Any additional questions or concerns, feedback? Anybody want to talk to me about how much they like my cat gif? I'm obsessed with that thing.
All right. Well, it looks like you're really just very thorough, Rachel.
Yes.
But to the folks that did ask questions, thank you very much. They were all excellent questions. I love it when folks, are just showing that they're really actually taking in the information and thinking about it. And to all of the participants who jumped on the call today, we thank you very much. Hopefully we will see you again next week for another one of our 1U digital trainings.
And again, anybody, if there's anything that you'd like to talk about further at more length, feel free to email me. Again, my email is labruyere@aflcio.org.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I always wait a few seconds just in case.
Oh my god, I was so obsessed with it.
I was like bursting out laughing. I was like, oh god, I hope I'm on mute. I
hate not being able to see people's faces because I'm still on the side because I'm still watching the cat, guys, because I really was.